Hello. Um, how you all doing, man? We apologize for starting so late today. Um, I had an important engagement that took me a little longer, and so I just got back on. But Lamin will be here any minute. Lamin Tamba is my guest today, and he'll be here any minute, and we'll start the conversation. So you all stick around for a minute, and then we'll get on with it. Thank you for being on. Thank you. Allah Baraka Babake for your patience and for your understanding as well. But we'll definitely get on with it as soon as Lamin Tamba gets on and we'll start the chat. Thank you all. It seems Lamin is on. Hello.
Hello.
How you doing, brother?
Good man, good. How you
Good.
doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I apologize once again for keeping you waiting for the last 30 minutes. It wasn't planned at all, so I really apologize for that.
It happens, man. It happens. No problems.
I appreciate you, man. How's your evening going?
Uh Good in many ways. Very good. It's a long day. I did a million things today. Uh Went to several meetings. From meetings, I went to play five-a-side football.
Oh, that's dope.
From five-a-side football, I came back here and went to collect my vehicle from the dealership because it was getting serviced today.
Yeah,
So everything happened. How's
that's
your day?
not bad at all, man. I was telling you, I was running up and down, and thankfully, I can't complain at all. But
That's good.
I will just get right on it because I know it's getting late around that end. It's still only 12:45 p.m. here in Seattle, so we're way
All right.
behind you all. So
Yeah.
again, for all of our audience who are here today, welcome to the Dialectic Space podcast. My name is Ibrahim Asonko, and my guest today is Gambian brother, Mr. Lamin Tamba, who is based in the United Kingdom and very vocal and opinionated in regards to, and very passionate, I must add, in regards to issues happening back home. And so
Yeah.
today we're going to talk primarily about who Lamin really is, because I think for a lot of us, we see him a lot in social media. He's very vocal. He writes a lot. He is a public commentator in what happens in the Gambia, but we don't really
Yeah.
understand or know who Lamin really is, and what are some of the things that really over the years inspires him to be so engaged in what we all know is what binds all of us, the Gambia. Because I think a lot of the things get skewed by our political inclinations, and we see each other in the lenses of politics instead of seeing each other in the lenses of being Gambians. And I always like to remind myself that all of the time. And that is the guiding principle for which I engage with everybody, including Gambians all around the world. So I'm really thankful that you agreed to come on the podcast today to talk to me. And I like to begin the conversation from the top. And for today, we are going to start with getting to know who really Lamin is. So, if you would kindly walk us through your early life in the Gambia, where you grew up, the schools you attended, for example, and the experiences or values that really shaped you into becoming who you are today, very briefly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ibrahim Asonko. Thank you to the Dialectic uh, Space podcast. I appreciate the opportunity you've given me to sit on this platform today and share my experiences with Gambian people. And I often take on programs like this because I realized in the United Kingdom and back in the Gambia, people look up to people and look at the track they took from day one up to where they are today. And that's the reason I do it. I never do it for the sake of grandiosity, to
Yeah.
look like I'm important, to look like I'm successful. No, that's not the reason I do this. There's a lot about me that never makes the spotlight. But Lamin Tamba is from Fonyi, from a village called Arankon Kunda, some people call it. It's in Fonyi Jaro. It's two villages before you hit Kalaji if you're traveling from Brikama.
I know
Uh,
Arankol.
it- you know Arankon very well?
One of my brothers was born in Sintet. So part of my family, some of my siblings were actually born in Sintet. So I'm
Yeah,
very familiar. I'm very familiar.
right. Excellent. So I attended Wasadum Primary School because Arankon never had a primary school. When we were young, you either went to Kalaji Primary School or Bondali Primary School or Wasadum Primary School, or you went to Sintet. But Sintet was quite a journey from Arankon. So Kalaji and Wasadum were much closer.
Mhm.
Wasadum was probably the closest, except in the rainy season, it became a difficulty walking to Wasadum and back because we had a massive sort of waterway just after Jundang, a village between Arankon and Wasadum. When it rains heavily, it's like you're basically walking inside water to cross to go to school. Kalaji was, at least it was a paved road. You could walk by the side of the road all the way and back and not have any issues. But Kalaji was quite a trek and also had lots of hills going to Kalaji and back. So I went to Wasadum Primary School, primary 1 to 6. From Wasadum Primary School, I went to Fatima High School in Buyam. Fatima High School, in the context of high schools that existed in the early 80s and early 90s, it was probably the baby of all high schools at the time, because the first enrollment was in 1990, and we were the second by one. I attended Fatima High School, graduated from Fatima High School in 1996, went straight to Gambia College, School of Public Health. And with me, I think my early life was shaped by the environment I was growing in, or I grew up in. At the time, I was looking at situations that we were in, and I started asking questions. And people don't realize my activism actually started when I was about 8 years old. By 11 years old, I've been labeled as a rebel, basically. All right. And this is a true story. And I'll give you a background as to what happened. Because of a lack of education, my older sisters never went to school. Our mothers never went to school. So many things that happen in the household, especially when you're married and you cannot have children, they blame the women for the couple not having children, not knowing that it could come from the man's side, because people weren't educated. So every fertility problem was attributed to the woman or to some demons. All right. And at the age of 8, I confronted my dad, not in a rude way. I said to him, why can't you stop this practice that's taking place in our community? And I'll tell you why. Women that married for a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years and didn't have children, they suspected them of having some encounters with demons, or they were witches or demons themselves. So they took them to, there used to be a big rock, a red stone that would be in almost every village, near the houses, where they'll take these women that didn't have children, sit them there, chant something, and ask the woman to run. And then villagers will chase the woman with the sticks, and they'll be beating her with the attempt of exorcising the demon that might have possessed the woman. Now we know there was no such thing as a demon possessing the woman. But I said to my dad, this can't continue, because you don't expect this woman to run faster than these men from the village. And each of them had a stick, and they were beating them as they ran. I said to my dad, it has to stop. My dad said, yeah, he'll say something about it when they have a village meeting. But my dad was diplomatic. He was kind of telling me this is a practice that I cannot stop, because it's deeply rooted. It's been inherited from our forefathers. But he knew I was disgusted by it. Whenever they called for such practices again, I never wanted to attend it, since I attended it the first time. I said, one is a woman, they're not quick naturally at the time. You can't outrun men. And they were beating them like crazy just because they think they're possessed by demons. Thankfully, this is something that some Gambians, not majority, don't want to hear. But this is the major transformation that President Jammeh, the AFPRC and APRC brought to Gambian people, by making education accessible to almost everybody, and taking the excuse parents had of not sending their daughters to school away from the parents, made girls' education free and compulsory. Now, women know, men know that fertility is not just a woman's problem. It can be from the man. It can be both of you are fertile, by the way, but you're not making love at the right time. All right? So biologically, it could be one of you that has issues in terms of fertility, but it could be none of you has an issue. It's just a matter of timing. So I said to my dad, this practice cannot continue. But thankfully, with education, with technology, with everything, that practice has pretty much died in the Gambia. I've never heard anybody saying they're still doing it in Fonyi or in the Combos or anywhere else. It's gone. And that is thanks to educating our sisters, making them explain to their parents, and some of us who went to school explain to our parents that it's not the woman's fault, it's not a demon, it's not something like that. All right, maybe there's some element of demonic stuff, I don't know, that I've got no knowledge of what happens beyond the realm of normal humanity. All right. So I said to my dad, it's got to stop. But then later, By the time I got to 11, we were doing kafos, like a village will go and weed somebody's farm or harvest somebody's crops, and that person will pay the village. So the older bros will take that money and embezzle it or do something with it. So our village was kind of backwards when it came to buying football kit, buying balls for football, buying kit for the village team. So I got fed up of every other village having very good kit, and we couldn't have it. So I kept on asking, where's the money that we got from X's farm, X's rice field? All that money, where has it gone? And they couldn't explain because somebody just sits down and says, I'm going to spend that money on myself. You know what, Ego? Somebody will spend it and they'll make excuses and they'll say, Langin Olem, Allah Haketu, things like that. There were no repercussions for people taking public stuff and spending it on themselves.
Mhm.
So I created my own society in the village, got some of my age mates, some of the younger ones, some slightly older than me, them together, put us together and formed an association and we started our own work. All right. And I managed the funds. So we went and worked in people's farms. We were patching up the potholes because PPP tarmac was absolute rubbish. It was full of potholes. You couldn't travel from Brikama to Soma in a normal journey time. The road was full of, so we used to patch up potholes with gravel. And the drivers would slow down, give us some money, give us biscuits, give us some confectionery sometimes. And we were happy. Village kids have biscuits from Europe, have corned beef sometimes, have sardines sometimes. So we were jubilating. We became so successful, and we gave money to some of our drivers, local drivers that go from Sintet, because Sintet public transport, vans.
Yes.
So we give them money and say, when you go to Brikama, there are these plastic balls we used to call Wembley. All right. So we used to buy them. The drivers would bring them for us because I gave them money to go to Brikama. And then the village elders called me to a meeting and my age mates, all right? They said I was the lead rebel. They started calling me names. They started threatening me that I was undermining the authority of the village by forming my own association because of corruption that was taking place. All right? So I formed the association to move away from it. So they called me. Imagine 10, 11-year-old called to a bantaba and being addressed and being singled out. You're the rebel, you're the leader of the bunch. So I started my activism very early. I started confronting what was wrong very early in my life. I went to high school, the same thing. I was standing up for people, bullying, I was standing up to it. I was a leader from age naught, went from primary school, I was captaining my football teams. I was leader of the senior schools, Form 5 in high school. I went to Gambia College. I was president of Student Union, and I led that to medical and health services. Within a few months, I was leading a unit of graduating from the School of Public Health. So what we did was School of Public Health. So going from high school, the high school was in Buyam, Fatima High School. I went to School of Public Health. And as you know, when we were little, there were so many communicable diseases, infectious diseases. So luckily, in the late 90s, the World Health Organization and the APRC government came up with a mass immunization. The government wanted to get rid of measles, mumps, rubella, polio, especially yellow fever, and other things. Were pretty much eradicated by my batch and other people. We did mass immunization. And as a teenager in Gambia College and other, I was leading teams. I was given a vehicle. I was driving around. All right. And leading teams. I was in charge of the Bakau Ward, Bakau Health Center, going all the way to, I think, Westfield, and then to the stadium and other places, immunizing. But sometimes I'll go to Brikama, sometimes I'll go all the way up country. And I eventually got posted to Bureng, but I didn't last at Bureng. I think I spent 24 hours in Bureng, sadly. Yes, because when I graduated from the School of Public Health, I did very well. I came out of the entire Gambia College and I got a scholarship, a very lucrative scholarship from the Sultan of Brunei. At that time, the Sultan of Brunei was the wealthiest man on earth. All right. And if you broke records in the Commonwealth, you get his scholarship. Some records, you get scholarship. So I graduated at the time at Gambia School of Public Health with a cumulative grade point average that was never attained before in Gambia College's history. So I got that scholarship, very lucrative. I won all the awards, and I got the scholarship, but the cutoffs at the Ministry of Education, whatever they done with the scholarship, God knows. That scholarship never failed. Anybody who broke records in the Commonwealth got the scholarship, except me. It failed. Whether the cutoffs took it and gave it to somebody else, their cousin, their niece, their nephew. This is 2001, by the way. I don't know what happened. They just said to me, your scholarship didn't materialize. I said, why? They didn't explain to me why the scholarship didn't materialize. I said, okay, cool, no problems. So when I found out the scholarship didn't materialize, I said, okay. So we were waiting for postings at the medical and health services. Our offices were next to State House, and I think they're still there. That's where they process birth certificates and other things. So I was posted at the food hygiene unit for a start, but one of my senior officers who was there at the occupational health and safety section was being moved to another project. So I was told to head the occupational health and safety unit straight from college. All right. However, before we got employed at medical and health services, we had lots of problems with the ministry. They were delaying our appointment. There was a lot of vacancy. We were basically qualified by the time we completed our HND, Higher National Diploma in Environmental Studies. Because when you're doing the School of Public Health and Nursing, you're working at the same time studying. All right. But then they kept on pushing us back. You're going to start tomorrow. You're going to start next week. You're going to start next month. We sat there for 6 months, back and forth. So basically, I raised the temperature in the Ministry of Health. That didn't please the minister. It didn't please the Director of Health Services. It didn't please the Permanent Secretary. They said I was a hothead and that they were going to move me from the headquarters and send me to Bureng. I said, Bureng is my people. I'm happy to go anywhere. I was born in a hut in Arankonkunda, a hut that leaks. When it rains, we have to get up and wait until the rain subsides, or we put buckets in places. So you send me to Bureng, I'm happy. They're my people. Now, the evening I got to Bureng, I think it was on a Wednesday evening, to start work on a Thursday. I had a call straight away from the admissions tutor of the University of Birmingham.
Oh, wow. Lamin, are you with us?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Oh, yeah, probably it's glitch of the internet for a little bit. Yes, but please proceed.
Yeah, I think it's my internet here. Let me turn the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi seems to have disappeared. Let me turn the Wi-Fi off.
Okay. Lamin is coming back right on. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So is it better now?
Yes, way better. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll leave your mobile data just in case the Wi-Fi fluctuates. So that's how it happened. So I got sent to Brent. Then I had a call that evening from admissions tutor at the University of Birmingham to say, you applied to do a master's degree. Actually, it was a bachelor's degree at the University of Birmingham, but we never heard from you again. What happened? Because at that point, at the School of Public Health, they give you your marks as you go, and they tot up and they add up and they add up until you get to the final exams and assessments and your dissertation, and then they'll give you your final CGPA. And I said, and your paper results look really good. We don't know why you didn't proceed with your application. I said, well, I just wanted to complete my course first. I didn't want to jump ship. And also I realized that I couldn't pay for my course because it was £11,000 for an international student a year. And then I have to look after myself, and then I have to pay rent, and then I have to look after my families in the Gambia. All right. Yes, thank you, guys. So I said, that's why I abandoned my application. He says, do you still want to study at the University of Birmingham? And I said, yes. Have you completed your course now? And I said, yes. Have you got the documents with you? And I said, yes. He says, can you meet me tomorrow at Senegambia Hotel? He came to Gambia on holiday and wanted to meet me. I said, yeah, I'm a bit far from Senegambia Hotel. I'm up country on a mission, but I can come tomorrow. So I spoke to the manager of Bureng Health Center, and he said, yeah, you can go if it's urgent. You can go and sort something out and come back next week, Monday, because by the time you get to the combos on Thursday, it's already Friday. There's no point coming back on Friday. So I went there Thursday, met him, and says, "Okay, I'm going to send your documents to the British High Commission. Yeah, you make your visa application. Can you make your visa application?" And I said, "Yeah." So I went to the bank the next day. You know how it goes. We go and pick up bank statements from banks, right? So I picked up one of those bank statements. Couldn't go to the embassy on Friday because British High Commission was having a strike at that time in 2001. So I went on a Monday, couldn't submit because the queue was long.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went on a Tuesday again. I managed to submit. But I submitted my documents. This is no joke, right? I submitted my documents. I was the last person to submit. I was ticket number 45. And they were taking just 30 people that time in the Gambia. But on that particular day, on Tuesday, they went up to ticket number 45, and I was number 45. So I was the last to go into the interview hall. I went in there, submitted my papers, and the counselor came out and said, "Can I talk to Lamin Tamba, please?" And I said, "Yeah, this is Lamin Tamba standing here." He said, "Come back on Friday for your visa." I said, "What?
Wow.
No interview, nothing." Yeah, serious. So, but I later realized it was the university that sent them my documents prior to me going there. So he said to me, "Come on Friday around about 11 a.m. and get your visa." So I rang my department and said, "Unfortunately, I cannot come to Breng now because of XYZ."
Mm-hmm.
So they said, "Oh, cool. Let us know when you can come back. But if you don't come back in the next 2, 3 weeks, we're gonna have to suspend your postings, and you might not get your salary until you come back to Breng." I said, "Yeah, that's fine." So I went on Friday. The counselor said, "I wanted to give you a 4-year visa to cover your studies, but I'm going to give you 6 months because I want to force you to go to university because your papers are really good." I said, "Okay." So I left. That's how I traveled. So I went to my department, submitted my resignation. I said, "I'm going to leave." This was in August. I said to them I was leaving at the end of August because I'm traveling to the UK in September. So that's how I came to the UK. I couldn't go to the university straight away because I didn't have the £11,000, but I managed to go to the university the following September, which is 2002. I did my master's degree in environmental health. So I didn't even, they said to me, "Your qualifications are very good. You don't have to go back to bachelor's degree level. What you've done is almost equivalent to bachelor's degree because one, you got the work experience. Number two, you got a HND. The only difference is a full dissertation with the bachelor's degree, so you can go straight to master's degree." So I did the master's degree in environmental health, and I got a job even before I qualified because one of my classmates worked for a council in London and said, "We're having vacancies. Uh, I'll let you know when there's a vacancy, you can apply." So that came about. I applied and I got the job. That's how my public service started in the United Kingdom. All right, but my background is born and bred in Fonyi, went to high school, was in primary school, Fatima High School, Gambia College School of Public Health. At first, the School of Public Health was in Banjul, opposite the former Atlantic Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
But after our first year, the school was moved to Brikama, next to Gambia College, because a new campus was built by the African Development Bank. Yeah. So
So
that's how my journey brought me to the United Kingdom.
thank you very much for that really wonderful and elaborative, like to establish a foundation of who really Lamin Tamba is and where he comes from, and his training all the way from Gambia and to the United Kingdom where you live right now. Now, I'm really curious, at what point was there any point in the Gambia when you were growing up that you
Yeah.
established some form of connection with the APRC party, which everybody know you for? At least I think that's one thing that a lot of people, when you remember Lamin Tamba, people don't remember
Yeah.
you a lot for, I think other things, but they remember you primarily because you were a very vocal person in the APRC, and you've played an
Yes.
invaluable role in the party as well. So, at what
Yeah.
point did it really stick to you that you want to be part of that? What really spoke to you in terms of APRC and what they were doing? And if you would walk us through that evolution.
Yeah, so the truth is I was radicalized early in high school because most of our teachers were Irish, and I used to chat with them a lot about the IRA and the Irish Revolution against the British Empire. So I was very well grounded politically. And I also used to read a lot about Gandhi, about African National Congress, and then used to listen a lot to Lucky Dube's songs, Bob Marley's songs, basically everything revolutionary. I used to listen to it. However, I was not interested in Gambian politics at all. Would you believe it? I was never interested. But I'll tell you what happened in 1995, 1994, going to 1995, going to 1996. While I was in high school, I used to go to Combos a lot, to my uncle's house in Bundung, Mauritania. They used to call it at the time. All right, it's next to Talinding, basically. And they used to call me on weekends when they have. There was an association called Foni Combo Association. One of those associations was made up of former PPP people. When the APRC overthrew PPP, basically some of these people in Bundung, in Talinding, and other places, various places, Fajikunda, came together and they called the association Foni Combo Association. They were very instrumental in convincing the junta to form a political party, convinced President Jammeh to ditch the military uniform and contest the 1996 presidential election. Now, that association called me once to come and deputize because they knew I was in high school. They knew I used to write a lot and I was a bit, I could do the job. So they called me in and said, can you help us deputize for our Secretary General, who used to work at ports, I think, and he used to come very late to meetings, and sometimes he never made the meetings. So I said, yeah, I can do it just for a short period. But I used to play very good football. I don't know if you know. I used to play very young, at a very young age, at Serkunda East Football Stadium, Nawetan. But it was brief because I left before I even established myself football-wise. So I used to say, well, I got training. As long as your secretary can get here, I can do the work for him until he gets here, then I can go and do my training. So they respected that. But occasionally the secretary will not come, so I have to miss training. But if it's game day, I never missed it because their meetings were usually Saturday afternoon. And it's usually a game day or training for the team. But I did the job once and they realized that I did a good job. And every time they'll call me at weekends or during school breaks, Lamin, can you do us a favor again? And then come and do secretarial work. So that association formed the APRC. And that association is the reason why Fabakary Tombong Jatta became an MP in Serekunda East at the time. Not Talinding. It used to be Serekunda East and Serekunda West. All right? Fabakary Tombong Jatta was rejected by the people of Talinding that he was not a native of Talinding, and Talinding was very instrumental in Serekunda East. If they didn't endorse you, you couldn't become an MP. So thanks to the Foni Combo Association, I used to go from the chairman of Foni Combo Association. Imagine, I was about 14, 15 at this time, 14, 15, 16. Yeah? I used to work from the chairman's house to Fabakary Tombong Jatta's house regularly to convey messages. Those were the days before people had mobile phones, before there was WhatsApp. All right? So most of the messages were land phones or you walk. All right? So I was going, it wasn't that far. It's about 2 kilometers roughly. So I would go there and then convey the message to Fabakary Tombong Jatta as to what they plan to do to help him to become nominated. And Fabakary Tombong Jatta didn't realize this until I reminded him in 2019. That you remember that little boy that used to come in the evening. Sometimes they give me lots of money to carry around between the two places. I wouldn't say what the money was for, because for me personally, when something is done on the down low, it stays there. If we chat privately, whatever you tell me, you can go and insult me all you want publicly, it stays there. That's my principle. All right. So I was helping the association that established President Jammeh, that established Fabakary Tombong Jatta, but not directly interested in politics. I didn't even vote. Actually, I wasn't that old enough to vote in 1996. Because when the registration was being done for voters, I was 17. My birthday is November. All right. So November of that year, I would have been 18. Yeah. So I would have been able to vote, but I couldn't vote at the time. So, but I wasn't interested. 2001, I was in the Gambia. I was not interested in politics. I think the election happened just after I left, but the campaign started before I left the Gambia. I wasn't interested in it at all. I became interested in the APRC soon after the impasse, 2016. That's my first connection with Gambian politics through and through. A genuine interest in intervening and stopping what at the time looked like it was going to be a civil war in our country. right? So when I noticed there's actually a lot that's happening beyond President Jammeh wanting to leave or not wanting to leave, and if I didn't step in and have a conversation with our people and give them a voice, we were going to have problems. All right. So that's what got me into politics to start with. Because during the impasse, I was opposing President Jammeh because of many things that were written against him, many things that were being said against him. A lot of those things turned out to be false. All right. So, like the 70 babies, 100 virgins that he was going to sacrifice, that he was doing X, Y, Z, all those stories turned out to be false. So I used to think it was true. And I said, well, he should go. Then afterwards, I realized a lot of things that were said during his tenure were made up or were provocations or people just wanted to tarnish his image. Some things he might have done, I don't know. But a lot of things have been proven to be false. So I thought, okay, I need to step in here because at the time, the APRC and UDP were at very intense confrontation. I thought, okay, if I join the APRC and give them a voice and set an example as to how politics can be done without having to rev up, without having to size up, wanting to fight the other person, how you can do politics without insulting the other person, how you can do politics without going into somebody's privacy. I can sort of demonstrate to the APRC people, and hopefully the UDP people will be watching as well. And then realize I didn't want to go and join. I could have easily joined UDP and been in government. That's not me. I could have easily joined President Jammeh when he was in power and probably have been a minister or something else. That's not me. I join courses when I think I can make a difference and achieve a successful outcome. Thankfully, all of us were sensible and there was no civil war in the Gambia. There were a bit of reprisals here and there, but generally, peace remained, and we're still enjoying that peace in the Gambia today. So I joined the APRC primarily to fight because at that point, APRC was, what do you call it, the victim at this point now when government changed. Everything was happening. Every single utterance of government officers was APRC, this President Jammeh. I said, no, these people need somebody to stand up and defend them, somebody to give them a voice. So I joined the APRC, and the rest is history. But I noticed President Jammeh was lacking in terms of social media and media work outside of the Gambia. So I set about setting up media platforms for the APRC. So the APRC official, the unified APRC, APRC television, some of the chat groups. Lamin Tamba is ours 1, Lamin Tamba is ours 2, Lamin Tamba is ours 3 to 5 were established because I wanted to create decent communication channels, mature politics, to be able to get people to see how you can do politics without being nasty, how you can do politics by being honest. Don't go around caricaturing people, framing people, accusing people of what you know not to be true. That's what got me into politics. And quickly, the APRC embraced me. I was writing for them. I was standing up for them. I was made their international spokesman and writer. I was responding to international media on behalf of the APRC, on behalf of President Jammeh, to a point where we stabilized the APRC until we had a successful rally of 28 October 2017, and the APRC is set up from there, and we recovered. We started going really well until when we started having in 2018 problems in 2018. Then 2021 we split into two, and then problems began.
We'll get to that, but I'm also curious to understand, in terms of without having to get into post 2016 yet.
Yeah,
what is your assessment of the performance of APRC as a party? I think sometimes that gets lost also in the conversation in the Gambia because we're so laser focused on, the current government that we have. I think sometimes we either try to diminish the performance of the past government in terms of what they're able to bring, or also like the government also diminishing or downplaying the performance of Jawara government. I think naturally that just happens in politics. But from your experience and also being involved from 2016 and also being Gambian, being up to date with what's going on at home, what is your assessment of the APRC government in terms of their performance as a government of the Gambia? Forget the, at least for now, in terms of the findings of, the various commission that has been founded, because we'll have the next
Yeah.
question will really focus on that. But what is your performance of the APRC government?
Well, the performance of the APRC government will sit here until tomorrow. I will not conclude the list of things that President Jammeh changed in our country. Let's start with the basics. When the APRC came, there were just about two decent paved roads in the Gambia: Pipeline Avenue or Kairaba Avenue, and the road from Banjul to Westfield, period. Every other road from Westfield to Brikama, full of potholes, it wasn't called a proper road. We called it paved road, but it wasn't a proper road. From Brikama to Soma, it's another mission. From Soma to Basse, it's another mission. North Bank Highway, there was none at all. There was no caravan bridge. People struggle to cross those bridges. So when it comes to mobility, transportation, connections, links, President Jammeh was the first one to create that North Bank Highway, build a bridge that they thought was also inhabited by demons and nobody could bridge it. All right, that's what PPP was telling people. They couldn't bridge Caravan Bridge because there were demons. Every time they try to do something, something went wrong. All right, President Jammeh came and said, forget all that. I'm going to build North Bank Highway all the way to Farafenye. He's done that. He's bridged Caravan Bridge, made communication very easy for the people of North Bank. He also came and said, one ferry is not good. If Gambia wants to transform itself into a modern economy, a dynamic economy, we cannot just have one ferry. President Jammeh actually went close to bridging Banjul to Bara, but when he looked at the budget involved in bridging Banjul to Bara, he thought, why would I spend $500 million bridging this place when we can have 2 or 3 ferries, have one executive ferry, and then spend the $500 million elsewhere? All right. So what the APRC did to start with is produce development that we never saw before. Make development look easy. That's what they did. Because when we were young, you have to climb up a mango tree or the roof of your building and put some makeshift antennas to be able to tune to Radio Gambia. It used to be nicknamed Radio Combo because you can only catch it properly from Banjul up to maybe Kafuta. By the time you get a block, the signals start getting scrambled. All right. Those days, you see full of people climbing up the trees, big, long, tall trees, to put antennas there. Or you see full of people sitting at the same venue, each of them tuned to the same Radio Gambia, and one radio will be scrambling, the other one will be scrambling, and I say, Ananito, they'll be listening to the same radio. They'll listen to the Radio Gambia and they're asking each other, did you hear that? All right. Yeah. But back to seriousness, away from the Sanawiya with the fullers, the signals were scrambled. So President Jammeh was the first one to come and make Radio Gambia a truly national radio that you can tune to, even in Koina, and be able to hear the language or the broadcast legibly with no signals being scrambled. Even the villages around the border in Senegal would rather tune into Radio Gambia GRTS than RTS. That's how good it was. Mm-hmm. But President Jammeh also gave us our first television station. When we were little, 92, we were watching it on Senegalese TV. All the commentary was on Senegalese TV, mostly black and white. If you had a colored television station, you were a lucky family. All right? Even if you had a colored television station, you had to tune to some Arab channels. Yeah? Or you settled with Senegal with commentary made in French. But 1994, President Jammeh came. Within a few months, we started seeing our own television station with broadcasts done in our own languages, Mandinka, Jola, Fula, Wolof, and then English. So we understood exactly what was going on. Football tournaments were being broadcast and we can see them live on our soil. That was the beginning of the great awakening of the Gambian child. All right? So what President Jammeh did, quickly, he shattered the darkness that overhung the entire nation in terms of education. We established the first Gambia government-built primary school from the beginning to the end. And then he went on, by the time he left office, we had 231 schools, mainly Christian missionary, Action Aid, or DOI, or Christian Mission, or CCF. 231 schools across the country to 1,031 schools by the time President Jammeh left. All right? When you educate a population, you build the foundation of a nation for thousands of years to come. He established the university. He built the first Gambia government built hospital in the Gambia. All right? Because the hospitals we had before, we know Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital was built by the colonialists. Bansang Hospital, other clinics were built by Anglican Mission or Catholic Mission or some other colonials. Even Armitage High School and Gambia High School were built before independence. St. Augustine's, St. Peter's, Nasir Ahmadiyya High School, Tahir Ahmadiyya High School were built by missionaries, Ahmadiyya or Catholics. All right? New Surat High School, the same, Ahmadiyya built it. So what we had in the Gambia was a government that pretty much neglected our medical services, all right, neglected our education, neglected our road network, neglected our smart communication, meaning television and radio. President Jammeh quickly brought these to Gambian people, so he lifted that cloud that overhung. Suddenly people began to believe. But he didn't stop there. What did he do? He realized parents will send their boys to school, but not the girls, because they thought girls will go and benefit the husband's family, not their family. He said, okay, that's not going to happen anymore. Not only did he pass domestic violence laws, he passed child protection laws. He made so school for girls is compulsory, but to take away the next excuse of fees, he made it free. That got rid of a lot of negative culture that we had in the Gambia before. Women became educated, they became independent, they became breadwinners of families. Our women were actually becoming self-sufficient in their narcos because President Jammeh banned the importation of onions, banned the importation of Irish potato, banned the importation of many agricultural produce that was being produced in the Gambia and was sufficient for our market purposes. All right? Not only did President Jammeh do that, he also realized our markets were very volatile. You know that single principle of supply and demand. He realized the supply of livestock products, meat in our market was scarce. So butchers were inflating the price of beef, the price of lamb, the price of Tabaski rams when these festivities came around. So what did he do? He started farms to pump more products into the market, because if you have a lot of supply to match the demand, then there was no need for the prices to rise. All right? But Gambians didn't understand it. They said President Jammeh had his hand in every pie. What they didn't realize, President Jammeh was countering the market forces. He was making sure our markets were supplied with adequate agricultural products to keep the prices stable. All right? He made sure our fisheries weren't given away to the EU, to France and the Chinese, so that our fishermen can get abundant fish to bring to the market to keep the price of fish, which was staple food for many Gambian families. The bonga, tropical herring, was staple for almost every family can afford it. Today, it's become a luxury to many people because what President Jammeh was doing, the government of Adama Barrow came and basically destroyed all those fabrics. All right. So now look at the price of fish in our markets. Look at the price of meat in our markets. Look at the price of other commodities. Now our market is saturated with Senegalese onions, Irish potatoes, peanuts, you name it. All right. Even rice that was being produced at quantities that was feeding a lot of Gambian populations via mechanized agriculture. The government of Adama Barrow came. What did they do for us? Take all these tractors from Gambian farmers. Even if you hate President Jammeh, surely you cannot hate your productive base in your country. All right? So now you've taken mechanized agriculture from farmers. You sold the tractors to Senegalese people. But then Adama Barrow himself came around and started supplying the people of North Bank region with donkeys and primitive tools that we used to have before 1994. Have people actually sat down and thought about why things are expensive in our markets? It's got nothing to do, well, it has something to do with the war in Ukraine. It has something to do with COVID. But the overriding issue is our productive base evaporated because of the government of Adama Barrow's policies. All right? That is the main cause. People need to remember, under President Jammeh, he had 2 crop failures. very difficult crop failures. Under President Jammeh, we had the worst economic crisis in modern history. All right? 2008 to 2013. Under President Jammeh, we had the Ebola outbreak that hit the tourism industry really hard. President Jammeh still didn't go into recession. President Jammeh still managed our external debt remarkably. President Jammeh's economy still grew from 900 million per annum budget in 1994 to 13.5 billion by 2016. All right? Our tourism was booming. Ebola affected it a little bit, but we didn't go into a recession. The dalasi didn't reach $100 per pound. The dalasi didn't reach 70, 80 dalasi per dollar. President Jammeh managed the market prices, managed the crime rates, managed education. The university is not even something I want to talk about, because today, Gambia's pride is the university. Today, Gambia's pride is the two dual carriageways that were built by President Jammeh. Westfield to Brikama, and the OIC project was 100% President Jammeh's. All right? President Jammeh built 15 bridges, the last of which was the Trans-Gambia Bridge, they named Senegambia Bridge. All right? Made communication easy. President Jammeh of high tech. He laid the fiber optic cables, the internet, all the way to Koina. Today, with your Gambian cell phone or mobile phone, you get signals anywhere. You get mobile data anywhere. President Jammeh brought about rural electricity. The one they lied about to say he took 1.1 billion from Social Security and pocketed it. No, he didn't pocket that money. That's the money he gave to NAWEC to provide electricity, water, internet, all the way to Koina. Rural electricity and water supply and internet supply. That's what President Jammeh did. He didn't pocket that money. All right. The other bit of the money is compensation for the Ghanaian government, for the Ghanaian migrants that were allegedly killed by his government. All right. He took $500,000 and compensated those families. And the foreign minister at the time, when that compensation was done between him, ECOWAS, and the United Nations, was the former president of Ghana who just left office, Nana Addo. Okay? So when people, if you want to talk about President Jammeh, you'll talk until tomorrow. Our tourism industry expanded, roads go to different places, street lights, traffic lights, things we've never seen before in Gambia started popping up left, right, and center thanks to President Jammeh. New airport terminal, a bigger seaport and more expanded seaport, I-22, the roads everywhere, whatever you can think of that's magnificent about the Gambia today, including Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara International Conference Center, were all brain children of President Jammeh. All right? So if you talk about APRC, you cannot ignore the monumental transformation politically and socioeconomically that his government brought to the Gambia. Thank you.
So I think we can all agree that certainly APRC as a party, including its leader, Yahya AJJ Jammeh, have done incredible stuff in the Gambia, and you have articulated that very brilliantly. I think anybody who is at least fair to Jammeh and his party would admit that, would actually have to concede that point that Jammeh did in fact, instituted very profound initiatives that changed the lives of a lot of people, including myself. I went to the University of the Gambia Law School, and I'm always thankful to that. And sometimes when I talk about that, people are like, well, that's their job. I said, yes, that's their job, but we had previous leaders who do not have that foresight to put that in place. So I always give that credit to him. But let's also, what gets also, people riled up is the idea that, in terms of some of the manner in which Jammeh governed, right? It's on one hand, he did a lot of incredible stuff for Gambians, but on the other hand, he also, at least allegedly, subjected Gambians to different forms of abuse, including some of the findings of the TRRC and also the Janet Commission. And we had a chat about this previously before. And I was just curious, and I know this, and I'll also begin by adding that there is no government in the world that gets everything right. I think generally you will understand that governments, to rule a group of people or to rule a country of a population that large, there's always dangers of government overstepping, especially in committing human rights violations that do happen. And in my opinion, is not an exception as well. But I'm really curious to hear what you're going to say as to how do you reconcile that? On one hand, you put in place these monumental developments for the country, change the lives of a lot of people, but also on the other hand, there's a lot
Yeah.
of people who are victims of your arbitrary rule that
Yeah.
you subjected governments to for 22 years. How do you reconcile these two?
Yeah, so it's difficult for me personally when it comes to violent attacks on President Jammeh, and there have been violent attacks, 17 of them. About 10 of them are well known. 10, 11 of them are well known. One of them, my own schoolmate, he was a year above me, but very close friend of mine, was slaughtered by Mbalo Kante and others at Farafenya Barracks, right? So that's trauma that I had to live with when it happened in 1996, by the way. He graduated from school, went to Gambia Armed Forces, was a cadet, all right? And then was slaughtered at Farafenya, at his first posting, Farafenya Barracks. So attacks like that, and whoever's involved in that, I have got no sympathy for you. What I have sympathy for, and I was involved in at least one of those incidents, the year 2000 shooting. So I'll talk about what I know publicly, because my argument is, I don't know if President Jammeh has done it, he's killed somebody. He had prior knowledge of 11/11 before they slaughtered their colleague. Yeah?
He's the president of the country, right? And
Yes.
you have a background in law as well. I have some
Yeah.
knowledge of law as well, and we understand this is not a legal discussion.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious to see whether,
Yeah.
in fact, you have any reason to wrestle with that idea that on one hand, this guy did such a great stuff for the country. On the other hand, so
Yeah.
many people allege that they were being violated by this person or his government
Yeah.
that he leads. It's just like when, for example, when we talked last time, you talked about the fact that Barrow, in fact, his government were allegedly killed individuals in either
Yeah.
Faraba or in Fonyi. We talked
Yeah.
about that, right?
Yeah.
And is there any point that you wrestle with that at all?
Absolutely, all the time. And this is why I want closure to most of these cases. I've always said, I don't want to get into an argument as to whether it's happened or not, or whether President Jammeh has done it or not. It has happened. The people responsible for it need to pay. Now, President Jammeh was the president, all right? The buck always stops with the leader, anywhere, all right? Anywhere, including our family settings. If your teenage child goes and impregnates somebody, or your teenage daughter gets pregnant before they're married, they blame the parents. They say, "Oh, it's poor parenting." The same with the head of state. Whatever happened under President Jammeh is his responsibility. The people who died at 9/11/11, if they didn't die in combat situation, if they were not a threat and they were eliminated, it will be his responsibility. The student shootings will be his responsibility. My question is, if we use the same rule, and I've repeated this time and time again, if we use the same rule, that the president is responsible for things that happened under them, we have seen an example of what happened in 1981. I was only two and a half years old, all right? We have seen what happened in 1981. And we don't want to hold Jawara and the PPP responsible for it, because we thought it's Kukoy that attacked him. So imagine one attack, 5 to 1,000 people, whatever the true record was, were killed in one attack. President Jammeh faced 17 attacks. None of those attacks had more than 10 people died, except the student demonstration. I can't remember the student demonstration. That wasn't an attack. That was, I believe, it's a little bit of heavy-handedness, and his government is responsible for it. But if we do that, we cannot then turn around and say President Jawara was a Democrat. He was a nice person, because he wasn't. He had elections. 1981 was an opportunity for them to settle scores. A lot of people died that shouldn't have died. And then they held a state of emergency from 1981 to 1985. They also held hundreds of people without charges for 1 year, 2 years, and some of them died in prison or got infection from what they call beriberi, cholera. All right? So now, President Jammeh is responsible for all of it. It's difficult for anybody to make excuses to say he wasn't aware of what was going on prior. Maybe he wasn't. But when it happened, he was aware of it. What did he do after? Having listened to the TRRC and many commentators, they said every time something like that happened, a panel was set up. Investigation was made, recommendations were sent to the line ministries to present to the president, and recommendations were implemented. Whether they've been implemented properly or the investigations were done properly, I do not know. But if you take the credit for everything that happened in your tenure, which is positive, you should also take the blame for the negative that happened.
Yeah.
And as they always say, command responsibility. If you're at the top, when you find out something has happened that you didn't authorize, you need to act on it. So that's
Listen,
the question for President Jammeh. Were you aware before? Yes. Why didn't you stop it? If you were not aware before, when it happened, what action did you take to stop it? So there's no running away to say he didn't kill anybody. Again, based on the US Constitution, the president is the nation is the president. All right? So when you're a president and people say Ibrahim Sonko killed somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that Ibrahim himself physically went and killed somebody.
it's the
It
state.
means Ibrahim's government killed somebody.
Yes.
All right? So the same thing we're saying, let's judge President Jammeh by the rules we judge Jawara, and people can be charged posthumously. Let's judge Adama Barrow by the same rules. All right? We cannot change the rule when it suits us.
To that point, though, I do think what's the difference is in terms of, if it is systematically done, if the government has several allegations. We've established that in our history that Jawara has, in fact, through his government committed human rights violations. People kept without charge, people are died in detentions. The government of President Adama Barrow have actually been complicit in some of those violations too. But I do think what makes it different in terms of Jammeh is for the 22 years, comparatively to these two previous two governments, is just the system and the level of human rights violation that occurred is at a whole different scale, right? And human rights violation,
the manner. It's the manner.
Yes, the manner, but also the systemic nature of how they have been committed, right? That makes a huge difference, and also the definition of what it means to commit various forms of human rights violations by virtue of statutory definitions, by virtue of international law, among other things. And so, personally, without having to get so legal, Lamin just left. I think he's coming back. Without having to get so legal about it, Lamin is coming back. Yes. So without having to get super legal about it, Lamin, do you think, I guess what I should say is, what do you think should be a means of accountability for former President Jammeh, if any? Do you think at all Jammeh should have his day in court for us to hear his side of the story in terms of a lot of things? Because I worked at the Truth Commission. There's a lot of people who are involved in these alleged crimes that I had the opportunity to sit down to interview to hear their versions of the story. And like you said, the boss stops with Jammeh, but we've not had an opportunity to hear from Jammeh. And I've also said, I think if Jammeh had come out, because Jammeh never had, there was not an opportunity for him to come out. But he does have an opportunity to talk to Gambians, and mostly he talks about politics. If Jammeh narrates his side of the story to give Gambians an opportunity to hear where he's coming from, I think we can have a much more nuanced and comprehensive idea of what really happened. What do you think happened to Jammeh in this instance, considering that just recently he said he's going to return to the Gambia in November? Now we know that it's not going to happen. It did not happen. And, part of one of his henchmen, Sana Manjang, has been arrested in the Gambia, and there is ongoing plans to set up a hybrid court in the Gambia to try people that are most responsible for human rights violations during Jammeh's era, which I suppose Jammeh himself is going to be part of eventually. What do you think should be the path forward in terms of accountability for Jammeh and those around him?
Yeah, so the accountability, as I said before, accountability is a must. What happens to Jammeh depends on what Jammeh tells us and what evidence he can put before us. We heard from people that sat on the TRRC, which I would rather not call a truth commission, but we sat because for me, legally, if the process is flawed, the results of it are flawed. But let's put that to one side. Jammeh needs to be given the platform to be able to respond to many things. Yes.
I mean, that's an important point. You said if the process is, if the process, the setting up is flawed, then the process becomes flawed naturally.
Yes.
But we can make the same case for the same way that Jammeh came to office in 1997 was through a military takeover. That's a flawed system to begin with, right?
Absolutely.
Just using your logic. I'm not saying this. I'm using your logic, right? I think the fact that we want to just use a part of the way a system has been set up, which is the argument for a lot of people, like the involvement of individuals who took arm to go after former President Yahya Jammeh, Alhaji Barrow,
Yeah.
has been a case that
Yeah.
a lot of people attribute to say, oh, he should not have been involved. But instead, Jammeh took arms to topple former President Jawara and eventually morph into a constitutional democracy through elections. So the
Yes.
fact that we just want to focus on one aspect of that process to nullify an entire 3 years of work, I think is completely unfair. That's my
Okay,
opinion.
so it's not nullifying the entire 3 years of work, but for me personally, let's go back to the AFPRC. Yes, I said before, I didn't support the AFPRC. I don't like unconstitutional change of government, whether it's military that changed it, or it's a palace coup, or it's a constitutional coup. I don't support it. It's not the first time we've had a coup in the Gambia. Perez Njai was constitutionally couped and was replaced. President Jawara was militarily couped and he was replaced. And in 2016, there was another constitutional coup because if somebody appeals the presidential election, no matter what happens, let's create the platform for that petition to be heard. All right. So that was a constitutional coup. So if we go by that principle, Adam Barrow himself, his first term was an illegal term because there was a valid petition at the Supreme Court to be heard. And there were judges that were already allocated to our Supreme Court before the election even took place. And they were willing to travel to go and hear the case. But they were threatened and told not to travel to the Gambia to hear the election petition. And this is true. It's been published. Okay.
The petition could not have stopped Adama Barrow from being heard. What could have stopped Adama
No,
Barrow from being sworn in? What could have stopped Adama Barrow
course.
from being sworn in was different, completely different from what Jammeh actually filed before the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but the petition was still not heard. Adama Barrow's term could have been abruptly ended once the Supreme Court decided that the election was rigged. All right.
No,
so we missed. Yeah. You can't. If the Supreme Court decide, and the Supreme Court could have decided that in the space of 2-3 weeks, it didn't have to take 3 months or 6 months. When an election petition in a presidential election is submitted, it becomes a priority for the Supreme Court. Everything else pales in terms of the priority of cases to be heard at the Supreme Court. I don't know if you realize this. Even in the UK, during the Brexit debate, the Supreme Court prioritized the Brexit one over many other cases because of the public interest nature of it. All right? So the Supreme Court could have sat in this December 2016. The judges were threatened. They were told not to travel to the Gambia. January, they were told not to travel to. That petition could have been heard, and the court could have said there has been a massive swing of votes from one side to the other, or there might have been even strong evidence of rigging. Therefore, we recommend that fresh elections be done or a fresh recount be done. In which case, no, the Supreme Court, it could have gone the other way. It could have, I agree, could have gone Barrow's way, but we missed a golden opportunity to have precedents here. All right? A golden opportunity to say, President Jammeh, you actually were well and truly beaten. But now, the argument will rage on forever. And anybody who says the 2016 election was rigged has a right to say so because the Supreme Court never gave us the opportunity to bury the argument. So now we go back to unconstitutionality of the AFPRC. I was not interested in the AFPRC. I was more interested in the APRC. And I didn't support the APRC in the heydays. But yes, President Jammeh, all these allegations they put on him, he needs to be given a platform, the opportunity, and you think the government of Adama Barrow would have said, yeah, he wants to come. Let him come. We have an opportunity now to hear from him. No. They're cowards, basically. They're looking at their political survival rather than instituting real justice in the country as they promised the electorate. All right? So President Jammeh, anything that happened in his tenure, negative or positive, he will have to take responsibility for it. But the same thing applies to Jawara. Same thing applies for Adama Barrow. So for me personally, it's a case of waiting to hear from the other side. I watched many of the TRRC testimonies. I got question marks over many things. But that day will come. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. All right? We're not there. Let's give President Jammeh the opportunity to come back to the Gambia. Give him a platform to be able to speak up or speak out and say, they said I've done X, Y, Z. This is the record I have. This is the information I have. Yes, I was informed, but X, Y, Z. And Ibrahim, knowing my Gambian people as I know them today,
Hmm.
we need to be careful because our people will lie to heads of states just to secure their little position. Our people will lie to the head of state just to uh, basically satisfy their aggrandizement. All right, that's what they're doing to Barrow because we've seen people saying, "Oh, our medical services is the best in the sub-region." Hamad Ba went overseas for treatment. Adama Barrow's own mother went overseas for treatment. Adama Barrow's own ministers passed away overseas when they went to treatment overseas. If you're looking after your medical services, why are you sending your top officers to go and get treated overseas?
Hmm.
So these people never tell the president the truth. And I can tell you something. Somebody inside who knows what happened with the Ghanaian massacre, they went and told President Jammeh it was actually mercenaries. And before that, attacks took place in Farafenye, attacks took place in Khartoum, attacks took place against the government of President Jammeh. And I said, mercenaries are there to attack your government. Yeah? And then they went and eliminated these people who might have been mercenaries. They might have been innocent. Who knows? We will never know that. But in my belief, if you subdue somebody that you say is a threat, whether they're terrorists or they're soldiers or they're mercenaries, if you subdue them to a point where they're no longer a threat, you shouldn't summarily execute them. All right? You should have them face the courts. If the courts decide that they're going to be sent to death, to their deaths, basically rule and sentence them to death, and then you've given them their appeal opportunities. They appealed and the court still upheld the conviction. Tough, all right? But give them their day in court.
Yes.
This is what I'm saying.
Right.
So for me personally, it's a case of let's hear from President Jammeh. Some of these people saying, oh, it's direct orders from President Jammeh. Have you spoken directly to President Jammeh? No. How do you know it was him? Oh, because my boss was saying, yes, sir, over the phone. Everybody in the army or security services is a sir. In the army, the first thing, sir, yes, sir. And then you go, everybody is a sir. Just the fact that somebody's saying sir over the phone or pretending that the person they're talking to on the other side of the phone is President Jammeh, those testimonies are very dangerous because if people see me with President Jammeh taking photos or walking about, I could suddenly abuse that privilege and then say to people, actually, go and deal with Ibrahima because he's trying to attack the government. Only to find out that Ibrahima actually is trying to chat up my girlfriend. But I'm telling my security forces that Ibrahima is trying to overthrow the government. Go and arrest him and torture him and force him to confess. All right? These things happen even in the United States. They happen in the United Kingdom. There are Palestine protest groups that have been in jail for over a year in the United Kingdom without charge. Do you know that? Guantanamo Bay has still got inmates 22 years later without charge.
Yeah, but so Lami, what I would say to that is that still doesn't excuse, just the graveness of some of those actions by the state actors, whether it is United States or whether it is United Kingdom, or in this case, it is the
Yeah,
Gambia government, for example, on the Gambia. But I also
that's
would like
correct.
to add that I think uh, we can all agree that a lot of what has been said at the commission, people can have a lot of question marks to that respect. I think every objective human being should really raise questions because there's a lot of things that don't add up, but there's also a
Yeah,
lot of things that you could also be like, yeah, that actually happened. Because at the end of the day, we all Gambians, we all live in that country. You may not
yeah,
be a direct victim of what was happening, but all of us were indirect victims
yeah,
of some of the
yeah,
things, or somebody who was picked up overnight, you didn't see them. But either way, even if there is not direct culpability, indirect culpability for Jammeh would probably suffice in terms of being at that helm of leadership in the Gambia. But
yeah. That's
another
correct.
important
That's
aspect, yes, I want you to really talk about a little bit because again, politics just it skews a lot of our conversations in how we see things, and
yeah,
sometimes we forget the most important people in this process, which, for example, are the victims, right? People who
yeah,
are perhaps those that were most subjected to what they consider as human rights violations from Jammeh. What is
yeah,
your opinion in terms of what should reconciliation look like between, on one hand, APRC and their loyal supporters, who, by the way, are very loyal. That's one thing I really like about APRC. Your
Yeah.
members are very dead as very loyal and supportive to the party, and they stick with the party. They're very supportive. And on the
Yeah.
other hand, you have victims who want Jammeh to answer for the crimes that they've committed. And Jammeh never came out or never come out to say, I am apologizing to the victims, but all of this is not my sole responsibility. We probably would
Yeah.
never say that. But how should we reconcile as a society reconciliation without necessarily giving up accountability or justice? But broadly, as a society, I think part of being Gambian and part of being African is also for us to deal with stuff that we go through and talk it through as family, for us to embrace each other, accept responsibility, and also find ways and means of moving on, especially if it is one that involves a former head of state. We've seen it happen in other countries where former presidents who have done really terrible stuff, and eventually the country has moved past it. Right? That's an uncomfortable conversation, but it's a conversation we need to have.
Yeah.
How does that look like to you?
So for me, reconciliation has to start with the truth, full accountability. And once people know what's what, if Jame had or still has records and say, well, these are the intelligence reports that were given to me that this is XYZ, this has happened, or yes, I just did that because of XYZ, and we all agree. I'm not saying any of those allegations didn't happen. I know some of the testimonies at TRRC were a bit overblown, but many incidents happened. My question has never been, did it happen?
Mhm.
My question is, who was responsible for it? Who gave the order? Who the act itself? Because eventually, that's what we're going to be able to rely on to be able to bring about legal action against President Jame or against anyone that was involved. Yeah. So for me, I would say to people, let's wait until we hear. In fact, General Solbaj is there. They didn't interview him. They didn't call him for testimony. Sada Manjang is there. Instead of allowing him to speak up and say stuff, they're rushing him through the courts. And we know why they're doing that. All right. I know why they're doing that. I'll not talk about it now. I'll talk about it in January. I know what's in
But
store.
he'll speak up in the court too, because there's a presumption of innocence already. That's why he's having his day in a very independent and impartial court system where
Yeah.
he's going has his time to defend himself against the allegations that have been put against him. So he may
No.
not be in a platform to talk about these things, but I think the court is an ideal place for him to talk about his side of the story.
Yeah, it will be different when he's in court. I can tell you that. The difference being that if he's doing testimony and he mentioned names and said other things, they could have gone and gathered more evidence regarding stuff. But once the trial begins and they've all agreed on the trial bundles, it'll be difficult to go beyond that. Sometimes the courts can veer away from it and go and get some more evidence from other places. But if the defense lawyers want to make it difficult for the prosecution, say, look, we already agreed the case direction. We're not going to move away from this for whatever reasons. All right. If he did the testimony, this is the benefit of having a testimony before you go to court, because he might have said certain things. He might have mentioned some other names. You could have gone and got additional evidence. You might have used that to dispel some of the myths around Senamanjang. We're not going to have that now. The opportunity may not be there again, because once they've tried him and something's happened, unless somebody else comes up with some other information to bring up before the court, it'll be difficult. He can just suddenly say, no, in fact, this is what I was accused of doing and this is what I did. All right. Or this is what I didn't do. This is what I was convicted for. All that thing that they're saying now has got nothing to do with me. You see what I'm saying? So we could have had a wider conversation, could have had a lot of evidence, or at least strike out some of the allegations that were leveled against him. They didn't do that. They're rushing him to court. What is Solbaji and other people doing who were close to Solbaji? They're not going to the TRRC. They're not going to court. Do you know why? You don't know why. But one day I'll have this conversation because I'm sitting on a lot of stuff. All right. It'll come out. I'm sitting on a lot of stuff. I can see the long game that Adam Barrow and his people are playing. I can see it. It's as clear as day. I said this before. They intensified their acts to be able to get to Sanamanjang as soon as President Jammeh announced his return. They always knew where Sanamanjang was. They could have always gone to him, but they didn't.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
President Jammeh's return that intensified their anxiety and their desire to get somebody who's allegedly close to President Jammeh. All right. So let's give President Jammeh his opportunity. Let's allow him to come back, facilitate his return. He's an ex-head of state. If you really mean justice, my idea of reconciliation is full truth has to be spoken. President Jammeh, whether he was responsible or involved or not, he should be like a head of service in a position that I am today. I manage many departments. Something goes wrong. In fact, today I had to respond to a corporate complaint. It's not necessarily you've done it yourself. You just have to apologize because you recognize something has happened that is not right by somebody, or the department didn't carry out the appropriate task that they were supposed to do. I'm so sorry this has happened. I sincerely apologize. But X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, these are the options we have to be able to redress the situation. So he needs to come out and say, yeah, I recognize this. This is what happened. This is the information I was given. I did, based on the information I was given, I did X, Y, Z. So for that, I'm sorry to the entire nation. Anyone who suffered, there's no government that's going to run from start to end without having victims. What we don't want is calculated victimization. We don't want that. All right. But sometimes it's out of neglect or security services being overzealous, or it could be anything. All right. So that's what accountability looks like. And we need to find it in ourselves to say, okay, he's spoken the truth. He's come out clean. He's opened up. He said what he knew and what he didn't know, why he acted a certain way. It's up to us to find it in ourselves and say, okay, wrongs have been committed. We're going to forgive, not to forget. And we're going to make sure those wrongs do not happen. Unfortunately, they're happening already. We're seeing what's happening in the Gambia now. But we need to do something about it and ensure it doesn't happen. And that will come from our people being honest to start with. Speak the truth to power. Say to the head of state, Adam Barrow, this is wrong. Your police officers are doing X, Y, Z. It's wrong. Your army or paramilitary officers are beating up APRC, no alliance people, even though they issued them a permit where they didn't need a permit because the event was indoors. You don't need a permit to have a fundraising event indoors. But just to make sure we're double sure, we applied for a permit anyway. We were granted a permit and they jumped on us and beat our people and tortured them and arrested them and took them to police station. These things are wrong. You cannot allow the Gambia police force to do that. All right? You cannot allow them to shoot protesters like they did in Kanilai, like they did in Faraba. That must not repeat. You cannot beat protesters like you did to 3 years Jotna. It cannot happen. And you cannot stand on a platform as a head of state and said, when I gassed them, who told them a bag of salt was heavy? When I beat them up. That is basically admitting to crimes against humanity. Yeah? And that's what Adam Barrow has done. Yeah, so that's the shape of reconciliation for me. Honesty, full accountability, and then we can do Al-Fatiha together and say, all right, let's forgive each other, come together as one nation and move forward. Or if people are still aggrieved, if they have the legal instruments to instigate proceedings against President Jammeh, whether the state does it or they want to do it individually, that's for them to do it. As it stands now, it'll be difficult for individuals to instigate legal proceedings against an ex-head of state and a serving head of state, but the state can bring up other things if they want to. But accountability is where we all speak the truth and ask for forgiveness from each other and we move forward.
Now, and we're wrapping up this conversation here, but APRC as a party has two factions now. There is Yes to Alliance faction, the part of APRC that is in cahoot with the ruling party of the Gambia, which is National People's Party, headed by Fabakary Tombong Jatta and some members, including Mr. Sidin Jai, Honorable Sidin Jai, as they call it in the Gambia. I just hate using the honorable now because I don't think there's anything honorable about this man. That's just my opinion. And then we have the No to Alliance, which you are part of the APRC. So President Barrow, which is also you can say on one hand, APRC is this such a terrible institution, public political party, and then eventually you go into a partnership with them to win an election, and then on another hand too, this party is just a terrible party. I just don't know how he reconciles those two. It seems to me that he only goes after you guys when he politically need you to
Yeah.
win elections. So, what is the fate of the No Alliance Party? How are things going to look like for you for 2026, especially as you intend on bringing Jammeh back to the Gambia as a former head of state, instead of
Yeah.
bringing Gambia to answer for the crimes or the alleged crimes that have been put against him?
Yeah. So for us, the APRC split into two. There's no doubt that that happened in 2021 because some of our former executive members decided to basically down their tools and go and support Adama Barrow. And we know a lot of things that motivated that. It was not out of the love of the country because Adama Barrow by 2018, 2019 was already showing signs of failure. At that time, they blamed the UDP because the UDP was the de facto government and Dabo was the de facto president. But when UDP left, what happened? There hasn't been any marked changes at all since UDP left. Adama Barrow has become more brutal to the APRC No Alliance. They said UDP was the one sending people to attack APRC supporters between 2017 to 2019. But since UDP left, Adama Barrow's conduct is still the same. It's getting worse because economically, Gambia is heading down the dumps. All right. So APRC, the other side went to Barrow, but we all know the truth was APRC No Alliance retained the muscle inside the APRC. We proved that in the National Assembly elections. We proved that in the local government elections. We had 5 MPs. They managed to have 2. Even those 2 MPs is because NPP pulled their candidates away from just one constituency and Bundunga Kunda constituency. Otherwise, they wouldn't have won. They wouldn't have had 2 MPs. All right. And if NPP didn't fund their campaigns, they might not have won. Maybe Suleiman Jammeh of Bundum because he's well loved by his people. But they might not have had 2 MPs. They had muscle power from NPP and the $400,000 that was given to each of the candidates. We, the No Alliance people, barely had 5,000 to give to our MPs. We just had the support, we had the loyalty, we had the love of the country, we had the love of the party, and we went in and won 5 MPs. And we did very well in other constituencies where we didn't win. We did very well in Busumbala. We did very well in Combo South. We did very well in Sani Menterang and other places. And if the APRC remained the same in 2021, by 2022, we might have had about 10 to 15 MPs because APRC was rebounding, was getting stronger, was reconstituting, the muscle was getting stronger by 2020. And that's what Adam Barrow saw and infiltrated the party and basically bought the souls of some of our individuals. And they went to NPP. And now some of them are reaping the benefits. The majority are downtrodden, they're distressed, they are in destitution. Gambia is getting poorer, cement price has gone up, rice price has gone up, the streets are owned by criminals, even our bedrooms are no longer safe. The hospitals have nothing, they don't have vaccines, they don't have postnatal record books, they have absolutely nothing happening in the Gambia right now, apart from big sums of money being thrown about in the media as to how Barrow's officials are embezzling our funds or trying to embezzle funds. Yet the poor person on the street is today regretting the change in 2017, regretting everything that's happened because people saw a better Gambia before. And now, in fact, that's why people are still hopeful that President Jammeh will come. And that's why the government of Adam Barrow is still refusing to bring President Jammeh back, because when things are difficult, people basically they lament. They look at the situation when things were good in the past, and they want to go back to the position they were in the past. That's what's happening now. It's a case of nostalgia. People thought Gambia was cheaper than this. Gambia was safer than this. So therefore, we want to go back to the Gambia. That's why people are asking for President Jammeh's return. And that's why Adama Barrow, after telling people that he wants justice, he wants accountability, he set up the TRRC for the same purpose, he's refusing for President Jammeh to come back and be heard just because of his political expediency. He's refusing for President Jammeh to return. And that, my friends, is where people need to suss out Adama Barrow. They need to know that the guy doesn't mean well for the nation. He doesn't even care about TRRC and the Jana Commission. In fact, he enrolled people who were recommended against by both commissions. He
Yes.
has them supporting him now. So, do you really think Adama Barrow wants to implement any of those coalition 2016 points? Security sector reform hasn't happened. Civil service reform hasn't happened. Nothing has changed. Things have gone from a probable nation to basically a deplorable nation. That's where we are now. Thank you.
Lamin, finally, APRC, no alliance. And there's
Yeah,
talk online. People have been throwing it out there, and I like to be the purveyor of, what a lot of people would call bad news, but some may also call it good news. A lot of people
yeah,
are throwing it out there that UDP and
yeah.
no alliance could be eyeing on each other for 2026 presidential elections. It's a very
Yes.
unlikely scenario, and I think you've also wrote about it a little bit, that that's the only possibility to reconcile the country
On
for us to
seat.
start. Yes,
Yes.
until President
There are
Barrow
many
comes.
facets to it. Many
Yeah, so
facets to it. I'll tell
talk
you
about
what.
that very briefly.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. One thing is certain. If the APRC no alliance and the UDP, especially if we can bring on board GDC, DOI, Sobea, and other people, Adama Barrow will know the game is up. I don't think he'll even contest next year. The biggest faction out of NPP government is UDP. After UDP is no alliance. The electoral votes have confirmed that. Sometimes in politics, it's not just the numbers alone. Moral victory, they always say in politics, is more important than legal victory. All right? So when you win a case in court, you take the government to court and win a case. It's not so much about you wanted to win it legally. You just want to embarrass the government. So if the two factions come together, Aaron Barrow is going to know the game is up because we're going to galvanize the opposition support. One, the beef that has been there between the APS and UDP will stop immediately. The country is going to be stable. The squabbles that existed for 30 years almost, 29 years this year, those squabbles, by the time we get to election next year, it'll be 30 years since UDP was formed. Those squabbles will be gone. We'll be looking at two parts of the country politically that can come together and actually create a new Gambia that we always wanted when change happened in 2017. Well, some people wanted, but because for me, the minute I listened to Adam Barrow's two interviews before he went into office, I knew we were in serious trouble. And I said this at the time. I said, I listened to Adam Barrow's interviews. We are in deep, deep trouble. And indeed, my post of 26 January 2017 is still there today. If you read that, it's almost like I saw Gambia in 2026. All right? I saw it coming. But this is the Gambia Saving Alliance. And people thought I was joking. I wasn't joking. When we did the National Assembly election, the opposition won the popular vote. When we did the local government election, the opposition won the popular vote. The opposition won KMC, opposition won Banjul, opposition won West Coast region. And if you work out the difference between what NPP got in URR, CRR South, CRR North, LRR, and North Bank region, if all opposition parties come together, GDC, APRC, No Alliance, UDP, DOI, Barrow is gone. He's gone because nobody believes in Barrow anymore. People are only following him for what they can get out of him before he leaves office. All right? Even his followers don't believe in him. He certainly doesn't believe in his own followers because he said, if I step down today, NPP will be dead. Yeah? So he doesn't believe in his followers and his followers don't believe in him. What are we waiting for? What is the UDP waiting for? What's the APRC No Alliance waiting for? Let's forget about UDP did this to President Jammeh the day before. APRC did this to UDP the day. Sometimes we may not forget. So using the word forget is not the right word. Let's overcome the interpersonal issues that happened. We have got a nation before us, and the nation is thinking. After that World Bank $45 million, we're gone to $135 billion in debt, external debt alone. 45 billion. All right, that's where we're heading now. Now, ordinarily, that's not too bad, as long as you can see evidence of it on the ground. But we haven't seen any of it. If your hospital cannot afford surgical gloves, what kind of nation do you have? If your school children have gone back to sitting on the floor and taking their furniture to school, something that the APRC government eradicated, where do you think we're going? School children are stabbing their teachers in classrooms these days. Under Jame, unless you've taken some high doses of the white powder, you will never ever contemplate doing stuff like that because you know actions had consequences. All right? Now, there are no consequences. People can do donuts in their vehicles right on the high street and knock other people and nearly kill. Somebody was killed by doing donuts. And it's still happening. Nobody cares. The government of Adam Barrow settled the, and Ibrahim, look at it this way and try and confirm this. Since President Jammeh announced his return, crime rate in the Gambia went sky high to rock bottom. You know why? Because the government of Adama Barrow deployed the National Intelligence Agency, the police intelligence, the army intelligence, and COMOC to all corners of Gambian soil. Because they thought President Jammeh was going to sneak in through the border using Sanamanjang and others. Now it's turned out Sanamanjang wasn't even in the process of attempting a coup anyway. Those were lies that were spewed by Gambian media houses. There was no coup, and I knew that. They provided intense security in the Gambia to a point where there was no room for criminals. All right? You watch now. As soon as they know President Jammeh is not going to come, they will not care again. So to protect his own presidency, Adama Barrow is willing to deploy our security apparatus everywhere. All right? But to protect the citizens, he will not do it. This is the kind of man we have. Even he said it. He said he didn't mind what his ministers were doing because they were reporting his ministers were stealing money. They were selling tourism development land, reserve land left. He said he didn't mind as long as they didn't threaten his position. The day they threatened his position, that's the day he sacked Dabo, and 3-4 other UDP ministers because they threatened his position. But before that, he didn't care. We had corruption like half for me, half for the minister. He did nothing about it. They burned the offices at Fisheries Ministry. Did nothing about it. Gambia Ports, nothing. NAWEC, nothing. GRA, nothing. Yeah, Central Bank, nothing. He doesn't care as long as he's in power. As soon as his position is threatened, then he acts. And for that month of November, Gambia had the lowest, probably, violent crime during that month of November because security services were everywhere and the criminals were cornered. Why can't he continue providing the same level of security for our nation? Because he doesn't care. Doesn't care about anything apart from maintaining his position. Thank you.
Lamin, finally, clearly you care deeply about the Gambia, much as I do. And Gambia is what brings us together to always have conversations like this. We may not see eye to eye on issues, but at the end of the day, the overriding goal is to see Gambia move, right? And you've been doing this for a span of 20 plus years, or maybe even more. So I'm curious to really wrap this conversation with, why do you continue to do this? What really keeps you going? What is your call for hope? What is your purpose? Because you could decide to just focus on what I know is a very lucrative career that you have in UK and just forget about Gambia. You know, you keep finding yourself in positions where Jambe is saying, oh, I fired Lamin Tamba, or people in APRC are saying stuff. Those things don't bother you. Even if they do, you don't pursue that publicly. So I really do want to acknowledge that. But I would love for you to share with our audience why you keep doing this.
You see, that's the difference between myself and other people. And this is why if I can go to a UDP person's naming ceremony, I can go to a UDP person's wedding, I can go to a Fulbe Association and meet the First Lady and meet Sidinja and shake hands. That's the individual I am. For me personally, a political party is incidental. I lost a lot of money, I lost a lot of time, I lost a lot of dignity supporting the APRC. All right? But what people didn't realize, it was actually a Gambia calling. I could have stayed quiet in 2017. I'm not saying I'm cringing myself with stopping a civil war. But because of you and I, other sensible voices that came out during the impasse, going into 2017, people calmed down a little bit. And in fact, that's why the APRC started trusting me and giving me responsibility to represent them. Because previously, I was opposing President Jammeh. And then I went and started supporting his party. And people are asking, well, how did you do that? I said, well, It's because along the way, I found out what was true and what wasn't true. But also, I found that some people were being victimized and they needed a voice to defend them. And a lot of sinister plots were foiled because of people like us speaking up, exposing them before they're implemented, and issues like that. So for me, I see Gambia, my conscience is beating me. You know that saying, what you don't know doesn't hurt you. So before 2016, I didn't know what was going on in Gambia. Believe me, the only two people I knew in Gambia government at the time was President Jammeh and Assistant Jai Sedi. That's it. I didn't know what was going on. It was because of the threat of civil war in impasse 2016 that drew my attention to Gambian politics. And then I started doing my research. I started talking to people in intelligence services, people in the police force, people in the army, and they were giving me heads up, giving me information left, right, and center. When I found out what was actually going on, by that point, President Jammeh is gone. So there's nobody in Gambian politics that would say, Lamin Tamba go into politics looking for position. I could have done that to get in President Jammeh's government. I could have done that. President Jammeh might have given me loads of money, given me a house or cars. Nobody in Gambia can say he's in there for money because I was losing my money. I was sponsoring APRC candidates for their elections. I was sponsoring our rally. That rally, 27 October 2017, that brought back the APRC. I lost a lot of money individually because I was buying T-shirts and service for people, but also contributed $54,000 of my money that I lent to the party away from my own contributions. That money hasn't been returned to me today. They haven't given me, but that was a loan I gave them. They haven't returned it to me. So if anybody thinks I'm in there for position, some of the allegations they said Lamin Tamba wants to be flag bearer of APRC. That's why he refused to go to NPP Alliance. Hello? Thousands of people refuse to go into NPP Alliance. Do they all want to be flag bearers? No. I knew Adam Barrow was a failure. I was going to continue to fail. The guy hadn't improved. So it would be very difficult for me to turn around and support him. All right? So I'm doing this for Gambia. All these things I'm writing is not even Gambia now. I do it for most of Africa. I'm in 5 very powerful Pan-African networks. A lot of stuff that happens in Africa now, I get to know it in real time. All right? So I'm doing this for Gambia. You see, I said this before. The minute we have a government that looks after our education system properly, health services properly, our security properly, our agriculture properly, that government will kill my political career completely because I'm gone. I don't have any bone in this fight in the Gambia. What I'm doing is for people to realize they are being shortchanged by the administration they have. The government is not giving them what they should be having. And Adam Barrow's government was received with goodwill. The amount of money they pumped on Barrow's government, I swear to God, if President Jammeh had it, we might be talking about a different Gambia today. Yeah? But hopefully we'll have the opportunity to correct the situation. I'm doing this for Gambia. Even now, I'm not APRC. I'm not supporting President Jammeh. But the truth is the truth. So if you ask me, who built XYZ, I say it's President Jammeh. If you ask me what I need to talk about what I know, which is President Jammeh's unprecedented development. Is it true or not? It's true. So why don't you want me to say that President Jammeh built the university? That President Jammeh brought about the OIC? Why? What's wrong with me saying that? But when he say it, they say, oh, President Jammeh expelled you and he's still supporting. No, I'm just stating the obvious. The other day I said, you guys want to go and protest against Adam Barrow, against his third term. We don't have term limits. Yeah? You have got a moral argument. You can go and say you shouldn't stay for 3 years, 3 terms, but you don't have a legal argument.
Yes.
So you can go and protest, it's your right, but you really don't have a legal argument. What we need to do is use that energy to unify the opposition. All right? If Adam Barrow is doing corruption now, why are they paying car power in dollars? We can protest against that. Why haven't we got vaccines for newborns? We can protest against that. Why aren't we getting postnatal records? We can protest against that. Why are you protesting against 3 times when your party leader has been in their position for umpteenth terms? What argument have you got morally? You don't have a legal argument and you don't have a moral argument. UDP had a long-serving party leader. DOI have a long-serving party leader. GTC have a long-serving party leader. But you're going to go around and tell people that Adam Barrow shouldn't be there long term.
Yeah.
So start charity from home. All right? That's what I'm saying. They're losing the moral argument, but they don't have a legal argument. So let's get up and do something for our nation. And that's why I'm appealing to all opposition figures. Let's come together and sort something out.
Lamin, finally, before I let you go,
Yeah.
this has been fun. This has been really wonderful chatting with you. But what is next for Lamin? You sound very political to me, and it seems to me clearly you have huge stakes in terms of
Yeah.
being a figure that will be very influential. You already are very influential in our political space. Do we envision Lamin Tamba beyond 2026, let's say, for example, 2031 in the Gambia presidential elections through APRC?
No. So being president is probably not in my plans at all. However, if we manage to unite the opposition this year or next year, it's already too late for this year. I will be on the ground. I will assist as much as I can. And if that then leads to establishing a government and helping the country, I'll do that. Not in a presidential capacity.
Okay.
I've had many people push me in that direction and said, you need to go back. You need to go back and take over. You need to go back because right now, most of the outspoken young Gambians out there, I don't consider myself young anymore. Most of the young Gambians out there, you're the only one that is sticking to your principles. Other people have said stuff against Adam Barrow, and they're down their tools, they're going in there for opportunity. Some people will say this today, then they say the next day something else. I've got principles, and I don't sell those principles. I'll join because I think I can make a difference, or I'll join because where I am is no longer competing with the 21st century. All right? So if I join UDP, I think I can make a difference and change the psyche of UDP supporters, their mentality, the way they approach the public. I can change that. If I join DOI, the same. If I join UDP, the same. So if coming together as an opposition culminates in an election victory, and then the coalition says, we want you to be able to assist us in X, Y, Z, I'll say, okay, let me look at what my current commitments are. The nation comes first for me. So whether I'm going to be a president one day, I don't know that. It's not in my plans, because if it was, I'll be on the ground now in the Gambia doing stuff. All right. But I want a government that truly looks after Gambian people. For everything that you can accuse President Jammeh of, everybody agrees that he stood up for the country when it was necessary. He was there for Gambia through and through. We want somebody like that, but also somebody who can clamp down emphatically on extrajudicial activities that take place in a nation. A government cannot get involved in sinister plots, or their operatives, usually it's the operatives, getting involved in activities that will affect the citizens unnecessarily. You only act in certain ways, and the action you take should be commensurate with the threat or whatever you're dealing with at the time. And that's what I believe in. So my future is all over the place. I still think I can contribute to the Republic of the Gambia in many ways without being president. But I need to weigh that. It depends on the opposition. As I said before, I'm not going to join a single party anymore. Opposition alliance, yes, I'm in for it, 100%. I'll be on the ground. I'll contribute in every single capacity, financially, physically, intellectually, anything I got to put together for us to realize a better Gambia, I'm up for it all day long. So if, as I said before, like now, when I'm managing, people say, I don't come across as a manager because I don't actually feel like a manager. I work with people. Yeah. And that's why normally people will buy into my vision. People, this is the fourth department I'm going to restructure now. Fourth one I'm going to build. It's a bit chaotic right now. And I started in this particular department not long ago. The fourth one I'm going to rebuild, and then I'll see where I am in about 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Yeah. But if the opposition comes together, don't be surprised to see me on the ground Even my own uncle Dabo, I can sit with him and have grill with him. I'll have his
Friday
famous
Mahal,
grills with him.
Friday
Yeah,
Mahal, Friday Mahal.
Friday, Friday Mahal or grill at Pipeline, I don't mind. As long as we're working towards one vision, I don't have an enemy. That's why I said to you, I can go to an NPP naming ceremony if you invite me. I see a compatriot first before I see your party colors. Party colors are kind of incidental to me. They don't matter to me. I see my brother, I see my sister first. I don't care what party you support. If we need to go and do community development, I'm on board. If it's your naming ceremony or wedding, I'm there. I don't care if we're at loggerheads politically. I just come to a community event or naming ceremonies. That's why people take my photos sometimes and embarrass themselves. They see my photos with First Lady. Oh, it's gone to NPP. They see my photos with UDP at a naming ceremony in London. Oh, he's now hanging out with UDP. He's going UDP. They saw my photos with Halifa Saleh. Oh, he's gone to Doi. No, that's not the individual. If you invite me and I'm free, I'll honor the invitation because I see an individual, I see a compatriot. I don't see anything else beyond that. Politics just happens. People are people. I look at people first. That's why I'm still doing this for Gambia politically. It's not because of political party. It's not for anything else but the love of the country. I want Gambia to go places. And that's all I'm doing this for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tamba. Thank you again so very much for coming on this platform. Also on a very short notice, and once again I apologize for having to have you wait for me for a little bit because I was late with some of the things that I was doing. But this has been a really enlightening conversation for me, and I hope we can do a lot more of this too. I can have you some other time as we approach what we know would be a very interesting election year going into 2026. But you really have very interesting opinions, very perspective, very knowledgeable too, I must add, when it comes to issues of the Gambian. So thank you once again for coming on.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be on platforms like this with your following. If you have a link of where this program is going to be, you send it and I can share it everywhere. With programs like Dialectic, we can share a lot of information with not just Gambians, because you're doing a podcast now and you think only Gambians listening. There are ghost listeners. People come and listen to it. People replay it later and they'll pick up a lot of things that we're talking about today. So thank you very much. Your platform is important. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Anytime you feel like you wanted to discuss something that I might have knowledge on or something I can contribute, give you an insight, give you my perspective, I'll be free. It gets hectic during the week. But if it's in the evenings after work, I'll be able to squeeze in half an hour, 1 hour to be able. While I'm doing it, it's on your platform, but we're contributing in terms of sharing information, educating our people, and our people can educate us as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lamin. Have a lovely rest of your night. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brown. Thank you.
Bye-bye.